Thank you so much for joining me for this important discussion about the biblical history of small groups. What we need to do in order to really take a look at this is look back to the Bible. What did they do in the Word of God, and how was that transmitted? How was it organized? How was it structured? One of the specific themes that's widely utilized in small group ministry and the cell ministry approach is what Jethro introduced in Exodus chapter 18. This is when he gave that timely counsel to Moses. Moses, he had just led the people out of Egypt. The entire nation looked to Moses as their leader, yet he lacked the skills of delegation. In fact, it seems that he had taken upon himself too much of the responsibility to lead. Jethro's advice to Moses is straightforward in Exodus chapter 18 and verse 14. When his father-in-law saw all that Moses was doing for the people, he said, "What is this you're doing for the people? Why do you alone sit as judge while all these people stand around you from morning till evening? What you are doing is not good." I'm pretty pointed, right? "You and these people who come to you will only wear themselves out. The work is too heavy, for you cannot handle it alone. You must be the people's representative before God and bring their disputes to Him. Teach them the decrees and the laws and show them the way to live, the duties that they are to perform. But select capable men from all people and appoint them as officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Have them serve as judges for the people at all times, but have them bring every difficult case to you. The simple cases, they can decide themselves. That will make your load lighter because they will share it with you. If you do this, and God so commands, you'll be able to stand the strain, and all the people will go home satisfied." From this passage, it's clear that Moses was trying to do all the work by himself. He felt that since he was God's anointed leader, all the work really just simply rested on his shoulders. The counsel of Jethro not only liberated Moses to concentrate on only the difficult cases, but also it really provided a better system of care to the people. George writes, "No one can listen to 100 voices at once. Most leaders, well, they have a hard enough time keeping track of 10 without the flock starting to feel uncared for." So there's this principle utilized in cell group church today, this concept of span of care and pastors over pastors really is a major theme in small group ministries today. In other words, everyone's monitored, pastored, they're accountable from the highest level pastor of pastors to the cell who is an intern. Dr. Cho, is an example of someone who's done this even at a church that boasts to have a 1 million member roster. Cho has been able to maintain an average of one lay leader to every 10 to 16 members. And this really was when it started. Every year, the last record that we have is that he was annually appointing 10,000 lay leaders for ministry. Describing this phenomenon, Logan states every 1.5 members in the church, they interact with these bodies on a weekly basis. A cell group grows to a point, it stretches really the limits of the pastor's ability to minister and care for the needs of that group. And so a cell group church, well, we understand that then there's the division. There's a healthy means of connection where individuals are mobilized for ministry through a cell network. Cell group is uniquely furnished to provide ample opportunity for lay involvement. So you've got the cell pastor, and they are called to visit, evangelize, counsel, administrate, care for the members of that group. In Cho's church, it would simply be impossible to have all these people all connected without these cell ministries. However, if you're training leaders on an annual basis, the church is able to equip and share and shoulder the load together. And so there are levels of leadership that really do assure true pastoral care. There are levels of leadership that really assure that the church is providing pastoral care to the congregation. And so in this model, a pure cell church is really organized in groups of 10, 50, 500, 1,000, and really the fundamental unit is that each group will have a leader over it, or someone who's leading that particular group. And in doing so, we get level of leaders really accountable to one another, accountable to the leader above them. And so these leaders, they're expected to visit, to counsel, to teach, exhort, evangelize. And really they're oftentimes categorically arranged, at least in Pastor Cho's model, according to location, geography, zip code. Now here in Texas, in our church, what we've done is we've divided the church into what is called our care network, similar to what a cell ministry might look like. These are intentional groups where the responsibility is really shared across leaders. They're accountable to one another, accountable to the church leadership team. These leaders, well, they follow up with someone who misses a Sunday. They band together to provide meals for someone who's in the hospital. In essence, these care network groups, these groups there are doing life together. They've got folks meeting in homes, meeting at the coffee shop, meeting, wherever. Maybe they'll do a community service project together. Really, they're called to share the best part of their life with their care group. And so these groups, what they do, they text one another, they send cards to each other, they celebrate baby dedications together, and really connect on a relational level. And so whatever method is utilized in a church, we're really called to be the church that extends love and compassion and care across the body. And so that the key, at least in our network, is that nobody is ever going to stand alone. Our vision is that the church body, the members of the church, that no one should ever feel as though they are standing alone. Don't feel like that they don't belong somewhere. They really, as the church body, as leaders, we need to provide a vehicle for folks to connect with one another. And so one of the elements of the care ministry is that you better have the gift of compassion, hospitality, just care. Really, these are the true hallmarks of what it means to be part of our care network at the sanctuary. I feel like this is how they did small groups in the New Testament church, because small group ministry, today we've got to understand it's never been meant to be this isolated unit. There's a link that involves where we are today and really links us back to what occurred in the New Testament church. This idea of small groups in the New Testament really is example by what Christ did himself, what Jesus did. Many have expanded upon Christ's small group ministry, his group. And really, the fact is this: he spent so much time with those disciples, so much time just hanging out, eating, talking about biblical matters, life matters with them. And so Jesus really modeled the path of transforming the world, this idea of connection with a group, with a community. He called out a small group of people to experience their own Exodus journey together, to move from enslavement of controlling social and political means and really enter into freedom, the freedom of connection with the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. In essence, pouring new wine into new wineskins. Beckham notes that for 3.5 years, Jesus lived with 12 leaders who were his special community. The Gospel of Mark, it really tells us the first priority for this called out community. He appoints the 12, right? He designates them apostles that they might be with him. And then for 3 years, this group, they're spending time with Jesus. And there was this far-reaching purpose, though, behind the formation of this small group. According to Beckham, Christ's example of spending time with the 12 is really the perfect model for starting this type of intimate small group church. He writes in the leadership core stage, really you're providing a group to own the idea of vision and mission, and you're allowing them to buy into vision, buy into what the Lord is trying to do in the church abroad. And so Jesus was calling out a core group to model his ecclesia, the called out ones, right? He was forming this community so that he would know that this group of 12 would be responsible for forming new leaders, new churches, and expanding the reach of God's grace and compassion in the world. This grew, to house churches in the New Testament. And it's worth noting that the early church, well, they didn't have buildings. The book of Acts records in the earliest of times that folks were meeting from house to house, gathering for fellowship, breaking bread with one another, praying, as well as meeting in the temple. And so from the beginning, homes appeared to be the place for the most enduring dimensions of the early Christian and church life. And so from the beginning, that's kind of what we see modeled in that book of Acts experience. In a day when home meetings are foreign and church meetings are really a way of life, really it's important to remember the home context of the early church. Acts chapter 12 and 5, we observe that the church was meeting and praying for Peter in the home of Mary, the mother of John. It really appears that primarily due to the early church persecution, really the role of the house church, it becomes the normative. F. Bruce supports the fact by stating household churches are frequently referred to in the New Testament epistles. And so sometimes the whole church, might be small enough to meet in someone's home, but then sometimes they would go in a variety of homes in a particular area. And so this was really true of the church, the early church of Jerusalem. What we find is a meeting in the house of Mary, and they're doing so. They're connected. They're praying. They have fellowship with one another. We see Priscilla and Aquila. They're accustomed to extend hospitality of their home to groups and cities in which they were living in, such as Ephesus, as well as in Rome. What we see going on at Philemon's house and at Colossae, we see this exact same thing unfolding in Philemon chapter 2. Bruce's comment about Aquila and Priscilla really quite interesting because he mentions their home in Ephesus and Rome, but it's also likely that they opened their home in Corinth as well. In Corinth is where we see them teaming up with the Apostle Paul. These were leaders, yet leaders who functioned at the most basic level of ministry, connection and care for one another. Thus, what we need to understand when it comes to the small group ministry and model and mindset, that this isn't just a fad. It's not just something that we do just because it's a neat idea. It's really a biblical concept of connection, a biblical concept of accountability. Thus, having a healthy small group ministry in the local church really will allow our churches to increase its spiritual health and the breadth of its connection in the context of a community. And so the people of the church, we no longer are going to be one-dimensional, right? Just showing up to a Sunday, but we're going to be gathering in homes or gathering virtually, however that small group meets. And in doing so, we are able to share life together, life in community with one another. We're able to encourage and pray and bless one another. And in doing so, we will engage more individuals and deepen relationships on a daily basis. Don't give up on small group ministry. In fact, go ahead and consider how the possibilities of small group ministry were not only just formed in the Old Testament, but seen played out in the New Testament church. And I believe in our present day modern context are a viable means for the church to exist as well as gain credibility in the lives of believers. May God bless you in this important discussion about the history of small groups.